I never thought that a simple night shift could put me in the middle of a chaos that would make my past come back to haunt me in ways I couldn't control. I entered the hospital emergency room that rainy night with the usual feeling of tiredness I've carried since leaving active service. A mixture of aching muscles, memories that insist on surfacing in the silence, and the weight of a lifetime of decisions I can't undo. The rain beat hard against the windows, and the light from the hallway reflected off the wet tiles in an almost hypnotic way, as if everything was about to shatter. The instant I approached the triage counter, I noticed the stares. There was a new, smiling nurse who looked like she'd stepped out of a TV commercial, but there was a glint of mockery in her eyes. I tried to ignore it. I'm used to it. But not this time. She laughed loudly, showing perfectly aligned teeth, while pointing to my scars on my arm. Deep marks from explosions and battles that no one but me and my brothers in arms understood. Wow. What's that from? A toy war? She said with a mixture of amusement and disdain. I didn't react immediately. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from contained anger. I wanted to show her at that moment that each mark told a story of sacrifice, of pain, of lives lost and saved, of siblings who never came home. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything now. I just took a deep breath, adjusted my lab coat, and tried to continue on my way, each step echoing down the silent corridor, interrupted only by the distant sound of monitors and sporadic sirens. As I walked, I heard a muffled scream coming from the adjacent emergency room. Instinctively, I ran toward the sound. A patient had collapsed, the kind of situation that demands speed, precision, and a cool head. I was there, my heart racing, my scars burning with old memories, but my mind focused on one thing: saving that life. Before anyone could react, I approached the man, checking his vital signs, adjusting his oxygen mask, and giving the nurses firm commands. And then I felt her gaze, still fixed on me, now a mixture of surprise and disbelief. Every gesture of mine was a silent confirmation of who I really am. Not the man she saw by appearances, not the forgotten veteran that many ignore, but someone who has faced death so many times that the calm of a hospital seemed, by contrast, almost surreal. Every thread of tension in my muscles, every scar on my skin, now told the story I didn't need to say in words. The patient was fighting for his life, and time seemed to stretch, and wrap around us. Every second was vital, and I could feel the weight of the choices made years ago on the battlefields, reflected in that corridor lit by fluorescent light. My past and my present collided, creating an almost unbearable tension. And she, the nurse who had laughed at me moments before, now watched me with wide eyes, finally realizing that she had underestimated something much bigger than she could comprehend. And there, in that instant, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. Not only because I saved a life, but because the perception others had of me was about to change. A mocking laugh could be interrupted by an unexpected action, a truth that was not spoken, but demonstrated. The siren echoed again, mixing with the sound of rain on the hospital roof. And at that moment I realized, no matter how much they try to judge me by my appearance or by scars that carry stories that no one wants to hear, life demands action, courage, and sometimes absolute silence in the face of fear. I was ready. And without anyone noticing, I was about to turn the tide of that night, and perhaps of many judgments yet to come. I never thought that a simple night shift could put me in the middle of a chaos that would make my past come back to haunt me in ways I couldn't control. I entered the hospital emergency room that rainy night with the usual feeling of tiredness I've carried since leaving active service, a mixture of aching muscles, memories that insist on surfacing in the silence, and the weight of a lifetime of decisions I can't undo. The rain beat hard against the windows, and the light from the hallway reflected off the wet tiles in an almost hypnotic way, as if everything was about to shatter. The instant I approached the triage counter, I noticed the stares. There was a new, smiling nurse who looked like she'd stepped out of a TV commercial, but there was a glint of mockery in her eyes. I tried to ignore it. I'm used to it. But not this time. She laughed loudly, showing perfectly aligned teeth, while pointing to my scars on my arm. Deep marks from explosions and battles that no one but me and my brothers in arms understood. Wow. What's that from? A toy war? She said with a mixture of amusement and disdain. I didn't react immediately. My fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but from contained anger. I wanted to show her at that moment that each mark told a story of sacrifice, of pain, of lives lost and saved, of siblings who never came home. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything now. I just took a deep breath, adjusted my lab coat, and tried to continue on my way, each step echoing down the silent corridor, interrupted only by the distant sound of monitors and sporadic sirens. As I walked, I heard a muffled scream coming from the adjacent emergency room. Instinctively, I ran toward the sound. A patient had collapsed, the kind of situation that demands speed, precision, and a cool head. I was there, my heart racing, my scars burning with old memories, but my mind focused on one thing: saving that life. Before anyone could react, I approached the man, checking his vital signs, adjusting his oxygen mask, and giving the nurses firm commands. And then I felt her gaze, still fixed on me, now a mixture of surprise and disbelief. Every gesture of mine was a silent confirmation of who I really am. Not the man she saw by appearances, not the forgotten veteran that many ignore, but someone who has faced death so many times that the calm of a hospital seemed, by contrast, almost surreal. Every thread of tension in my muscles, every scar on my skin, now told the story I didn't need to say in words. The patient was fighting for his life, and time seemed to stretch, and wrap around us. Every second was vital, and I could feel the weight of the choices made years ago on the battlefields, reflected in that corridor lit by fluorescent light. My past and my present collided, creating an almost unbearable tension. And she, the nurse who had laughed at me moments before, now watched me with wide eyes, finally realizing that she had underestimated something much bigger than she could comprehend. And there, in that instant, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. Not only because I saved a life, but because the perception others had of me was about to change. A mocking laugh could be interrupted by an unexpected action, a truth that was not spoken, but demonstrated. The siren echoed again, mixing with the sound of rain on the hospital roof. And at that moment I realized, no matter how much they try to judge me by my appearance, or by scars that carry stories that no one wants to hear, life demands action, courage, and sometimes absolute silence in the face of fear. I was ready, and without anyone noticing, I was about to turn the tide of that night, and perhaps of many judgments yet to come. I was just trying to finish my shift when I noticed a heavy atmosphere in the hallway. The hospital, normally a place of controlled hustle and bustle, seemed to carry a silent tension, as if everyone was waiting for something to explode. And in fact, something was about to happen, but not in the way anyone would expect. The new nurse, the one who had laughed at my scars moments before, approached the counter with a sarcastic smile and a posture that exuded superiority. "Veteran, right? Well, can you start cleaning up this mess here while I take care of the important cases?" she said, with that mocking tone that chilled me to the bone. That simple phrase carried contempt, a clear attempt to humiliate me, to reduce everything I was and am to a stereotype she thought she knew. I could have reacted aggressively, but I learned to measure my responses. I took a deep breath, letting the anger mix with the patience acquired over years of battles. "Sure, I'll help, but just tell me, who needs attention right now?" I replied, keeping my voice firm but controlled, trying to neutralize the disdain with professionalism. But she didn't want to hear any of that. Her colleagues watched her with knowing glances, some laughing softly, others just observing, perhaps waiting for me to go along with it or lose control. I felt the weight of each look, each stifled laugh, each whisper as if they were invisible blows striking my morale. It's curious how people who have never faced war believe they can measure courage with words. As I approached a patient in intense pain, I realized that my presence bothered her even more. She made a joke about my limited ability. And how strange. I looked in my lab coat, my scars on display, the heavy gait I couldn't avoid. Each word felt like touching an open wound. But inside me, an inner voice, the one I learned to listen to amidst the chaos of the battlefield, said, "Ignore the ignorant. Focus on what really matters." It was at that moment that something unexpected happened. An alarm sounded from a nearby room. A patient had gone into cardiac arrest. The noise cut through the corridor as if all the tension had been condensed into a single shrill sound. Chaos immediately ensued. Nurses rushed in, equipment was activated, but some people's gaze turned to me. After all, this was the moment when you would discover who really knew how to act under pressure. I felt my body react even before I thought. Every military training exercise, every risky mission, every second in which someone else's life depended on me, resurfaced. The instructions came naturally: compressions, ventilation, monitoring, precise commands to those around me. As I worked, I heard murmurs and even nervous laughter from the nurse, who was now beginning to realize that she had underestimated something bigger than her superficial perception could comprehend. The initial conflict wasn't just about personal disdain or a cruel joke, it was about being judged by what you see without understanding what you've lived through. The situation tested my patience, my ability to stay focused, and my determination to make a difference, even when everyone around me doubted me. I felt the weight of the injustice, but also the adrenaline of being able to prove without needing words that each scar, each painful memory, each trauma carried was not a sign of weakness but of experience, courage, and humanity. In the midst of the chaos, I realized that this moment would be decisive. Not only for the patient, whose life now depended on my action, but also for the perception of everyone there, especially hers, the nurse who laughed at me. I knew that, at that moment, a turnaround was inevitable. And at the same time, I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the mixture of fear and determination that always accompanies me in situations that really matter. The initial conflict, therefore, was not only external, the public contempt and humiliation, but internal as well. Every decision needed to be perfect, every movement calculated, because any mistake could cost a life. And in that corridor lit by cold lights, surrounded by suspicious glances, I was about to show that true courage is not measured by appearances, words, or superficial judgments. The sound of the alarm still echoed down the hallway when I noticed the stairs. They weren't just observing, they were judging, laughing silently, pointing out my every move as if I were a circus curiosity. The new nurse, who moments before had mocked my scars, now wore a nervous smile, trying to hide the shock of realizing I knew what I was doing. But there was still scorn in her eyes, that glint that says, "You shouldn't be here." As I performed the procedures to stabilize the patient, I heard a louder laugh, this time from her, mingling with whispers around us. "Look at him, all scarred up, as if that's going to impress anyone," she said, loud enough for some nearby colleagues to hear. Each word was like an invisible blow, ripping from deep within me a familiar feeling of rejection. I had felt this before, in situations where my experience was ignored or ridiculed, but here, in the middle of a hospital where lives were at stake, the contempt seemed even more cruel. The sound of laughter echoed in my mind, mingling with memories of explosions, gunshots, and the screams of colleagues falling beside me. For a moment I felt anger rising, a flame that could easily cause me to lose control. But I took a deep breath, remembering that any show of weakness now could cost more than my pride. It could cost the life of that patient who depended on me. The discipline acquired in years of active service spoke louder. Focus, precision, patience. Even so, the humiliation was palpable. Some colleagues looked at me as if they expected a mistake, a stumble, any sign that I was not worthy of being there. Every command of mine was followed by murmurs, suspicious glances, or stifled laughter. I could feel the weight of the contempt as if it were a hand pressing on my chest. "And yet," I continued, "because the patient's life spoke louder than any mockery." That's when I realized something even crueler. The nurse started calling out other colleagues, highlighting my every move with sarcasm. "Look, he thinks he knows what he's doing. Let's see how long he can last without making a mistake." The words were sharp, cutting silently, trying to reduce me to an object of entertainment. But I knew, almost instinctively, that my actions would speak louder than any words. As I continued to work, I felt the tension growing. The hands that used to hold weapons now held medical equipment. Every movement was decisive, every action laden with responsibility. The public humiliation wasn't just about what she said. It was about the collective perception, the silent judgment of everyone around. And yet, there was something in me that refused to give in. A silent determination to prove that respect isn't earned with laughter, but with actions. And then came the most intense moment. The patient suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. Everything accelerated, each second turning into endless minutes. The mocking stares were still there, but now mixed with surprise, doubt, and tension. I could feel the change in the air. The energy of the people around me began to shift. The contempt still existed, but the need for urgent action began to override superficial judgment. I felt every scar on my body, every memory of the war pulsing along with my heart. And I used that as strength. Every command I gave, every movement I made, was charged with experience, precision, and determination. The humiliation still hung in the air, but it was slowly being replaced by the silent recognition of competence. Every gesture of mine proved without words that I was not defined by what others thought, but by what I could do when it really mattered. And there, in that corridor lit by fluorescent light, amidst whispers and judgmental glances, I learned again something I already knew. The true measure of someone is not what people see, but how we act when we are tested. The public humiliation only set the stage for the upheaval that was to come. A moment when everything would change, not through words, but through actions that no one could ignore. The patient was on the verge of death, the alarm blaring incessantly, the metallic smell of blood and medication mixed with tension in the air. Every second counted, and the nurse's laughter still echoed in my mind, a painful reminder of the contempt she had felt until then. But at that moment, words no longer mattered. What mattered was action, precision, and courage, that which I had learned to carry from the battlefields. As I adjusted the oxygen and applied firm compressions, I realized something was wrong with the mechanical ventilation. Without hesitation, I gave quick orders, correcting every detail, coordinating the movements of the nurses who had previously mocked me. Hold it tight. Now, apply slow pressure. Pay attention to the frequency. I commanded in a firm voice, each syllable laden with silent authority. The confusion in the air began to transform into attention. What had been contempt was now turning into curiosity and slowly into respect. And then, the moment no one expected happened. The patient finally began to respond. Vital signs rose, heart rate stabilized again. A collective sigh ran down the hallway, and it was as if time slowed down for an instant. I looked at the nurse, who was pale, eyes wide, mouth open in silent surprise. She, who minutes before had mocked my scars, now stared at me as if she had seen something that defied all her expectations. It was there that I realized the power of our actions. Words can hurt, can humiliate, but the courage shown in critical moments speaks louder than any superficial judgment. She could no longer deny what was before her eyes, the experience, the competence, and the determination of someone who had faced death countless times and yet remained steadfast. While the patient was being stabilized, I noticed a heavy silence in the hallway. The colleagues who had previously whispered and laughed now watched me with restrained respect, as if they were processing the abrupt change in perception. That moment was not just a victory over contempt. It was living proof that appearance, scars, and the past don't define our ability to act when it really matters. The nurse finally approached with hesitant steps. There was shame on her face, mixed with something that seemed like a silent attempt at reconciliation. "I'm sorry. I didn't know," she began, but didn't need to finish. I just nodded calmly, feeling the adrenaline of the moment still pulsing in my chest. I didn't need apologies, just recognition. And at that instant, recognition came through the eyes of everyone around. It was a moment that changed everything. Contempt turned into respect, mockery turned into restrained admiration, and I realized once again that each scar, each painful memory, each trauma carried was not just suffering, but strength. War taught me to survive. The hospital taught me to prove my worth without having to raise my voice. As I helped the team fully stabilize the patient, I felt a silent connection with every person in that hallway. They now understood, even if only for a moment, that there was more to me than they could see. That each scar was a story. Each firm gesture was the result of years of training and suffering, and each valuable action could save lives. The turning point wasn't just about saving a patient. It was about transforming judgment into respect, contempt into recognition, and mockery into admiration. It was the moment when the veterans passed. Each battle, each loss, each scar finally resonated in the present, showing that the true measure of a man is not how he is seen, but what he is capable of doing when life depends on it. And as the patient breathed again, stable, and the looks of disbelief turned into silent respect, I realized that something inside me had changed too. Not just because others finally saw who I was, but because I knew, deep down, that every action, every decision, and every scar has a purpose that goes far beyond what the world can perceive. After the patient was stabilized, the hospital corridor seemed to breathe with us. The sound of the machines, which had previously seemed chaotic and threatening, now had an almost harmonious rhythm, as if each beep and each click was a silent acknowledgement of the effort that had just saved a life. I could still feel the adrenaline pulsing through my veins, each scar reminding me of the battles that had prepared me for that moment. But this time, something new was happening. Respect was beginning to seep into the air, silent, almost tangible. The nurse, who moments before had mocked me, approached hesitantly. Her steps were slow, but there was a change in her gaze, a mixture of surprise, humility, and recognition. I knew she had finally understood that those scars were not mere adornments or exaggerated war marks, but symbols of experience, sacrifice, and courage. I underestimated you, she said, almost whispering, as if each word were difficult to pronounce. I didn't need to answer. The mere fact that she silently admitted her mistake was enough to mark the beginning of the change. Around me, other colleagues who had previously whispered or laughed began to look at me with a mixture of respect and admiration. Some looked away, perhaps trying not to show how surprised they were. But there was a clear shift in the mood. The disdain had given way to the understanding that I was undefined by scars, age, or appearance. I was defined by my actions and the impact I could have. The head of the emergency room, who had rushed in at the sound of the alarm, approached, examining the scene quickly and precisely. He looked at me, his eyes assessing every detail of the situation. And finally, after a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, he gave a firm and respectful nod. "Good job. You really kept your cool and saved the patient's life. That's something everyone should learn to do," he said, his words carrying more weight than any superficial praise. At that moment, I felt that justice was not just a word, but a concrete experience, the validation of years of sacrifice and courage that finally could not be ignored. The most surprising thing, however, was the internal change I perceived in the environment. Those who had previously ridiculed or underestimated me now offered help without hesitation, followed my guidance attentively, and silently included me in the team dynamic as if I had always belonged there. It was strange to realize how quickly respect can manifest itself when concrete actions prove the truth that words alone cannot convey. As the patient was taken to the recovery unit, I looked at my hands, still trembling but steady, and realized that this experience had been a turning point, not only for how others perceived me, but for my own conscience. Every scar, every painful memory of the war, every trauma and loss I carried had finally found an echo, a living justification that everything I went through was not in vain. The nurse approached once more, this time with a genuine look of regret and recognition. "Thank you for what you did. I should have realized sooner," she said. I simply nodded without words, because what mattered was not the apology, but the silent understanding that now permeated the hallway. Respect, once earned through blood, sweat, and concrete actions, was infinitely more valuable than any empty words. And there, in that hallway, I realized something fundamental. True justice doesn't need applause or immediate public recognition. It manifests itself when the truth of actions surpasses the falsity of judgments. Every look now carried respect. Every silent gesture indicated that the previous contempt had been replaced by admiration. The past and the present met in a way that finally made sense. At that moment, as I watched the patient being taken to recovery, I felt a deep connection with everyone around. Not out of a need for approval, but because finally their perception reflected something real, something I had always known. Courage, experience, and dedication cannot be ignored forever. Justice had arrived, silent, firm, and definitive. And I knew that this recognition, more than any praise, was confirmation that my scars told a story of value that no one could erase. As the hospital corridor finally quieted down, I stood still for a moment, just breathing, feeling the rhythm of my own heartbeat, still accelerated by adrenaline and the emotional weight of the situation. The respect that had previously seemed impossible to achieve had finally arrived. But, contrary to what many might imagine, it wasn't external validation that mattered most. What I felt at that moment was much deeper. It was the feeling of reconnecting every fragment of my life with who I always was, who I fought to be, and who I still carry within me. My scars, which had so often been the subject of laughter and contempt, were now not just marks on my body. They were living chapters of my story, memories that reminded me of lost siblings, battles fought, and dilemmas faced. Each line on my skin told of moments when I had to make impossible decisions, of the cold of the night, on battlefields where every sound could be the last I would hear, and of the feeling of helplessness that accompanied me every time someone fell beside me. I felt each of these memories pulsing inside me, connecting the past and the present in an almost painful yet incredibly necessary way. The patient I had just saved was now being taken to recovery, his vital signs stable. But as I watched the scene, I realized that what truly touched me was not the immediate result of my action, but the memory of so many moments when I had failed to save someone. The weight of those ghosts was heavy, and each victory, however small, carried with it the responsibility of honoring those who were not so lucky. My thoughts returned to a specific night during my active service, when we lost a brother in arms in an ambush. His voice still echoed in my dreams, and I could feel the same adrenaline coursing through my veins as I desperately tried to save him. That memory, as vivid as the present, reminded me that sacrifice and courage have no audience. They are often silent, invisible, but undeniably powerful. Now, in the hospital, I realized that the same lesson applied on a different scale. The visible or invisible scars, the judgments and the contempt, all of that could have brought me down, but I had learned to transform pain and humiliation into strength and action. I felt a silent, almost spiritual connection with all those who depend on the courage of others. Doctors, nurses, veterans, ordinary people facing crises they did not choose. Every action I take, every decision I make under pressure, is a tribute to those who came before me and a reminder that there is still value in standing firm in the face of adversity. As I watched the nurse, now silent, reflecting on what had happened, I realized that there was also a lesson for her and for everyone watching. Appearance, age, or scars do not define courage. Only the act of facing fear and acting with determination defines someone's true character. I felt this deeply, as if my entire life experience converged at a single point in that silent corridor, amidst sighs and thoughtful glances. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A momentary peace, rare and precious, born from the silent understanding that my actions, my past, and my memories, even the most painful ones, still have purpose. War, loss, suffering, and humiliation do not define me, but they have shaped my ability to connect, to act, to deeply feel each life I encounter. What I realized then is that external respect, while important, is not enough to heal internal wounds. It is the connection with one's own past, the acceptance of one's own history, and the silent recognition of one's own courage that truly matters. And in that corridor, amidst stable vital signs and attentive gazes, I felt that I had found one of those connections. A reminder that despite everything, every scar, visible or invisible, carries meaning and value. And while the hospital returned to its routine, I remained there, breathing, feeling each memory, each loss, each victory, and each lesson that life and war had taught me. I knew that night would be remembered not only as the moment I saved a life, but as the instant I profoundly understood my own worth, my own story, and the strength I carry in silence, but which now revealed itself to the world, step by step, gesture by gesture. As the hallway began to quiet down, I felt a growing unease within me. Adrenaline still pulsed through my veins. But something told me the night wasn't over yet. And, like a grim omen, the emergency alarm blared again. This time more intense, more urgent, making my heart race immediately. A second patient had gone into critical condition, and this time the situation was different. It wasn't just a matter of saving a life. There was a choice that would test everything I'd learned about courage, patience, and emotional control. I ran into the room with firm steps, my eyes assessing every detail around me. The patient was unconscious, his face pale, his breathing irregular. The monitors flashed red, each sharp beep reverberating down the hallway like a relentless reminder that time was against us. The nurse, who had previously mocked me and now showed restrained respect, stood beside me, visibly tense. Her eyes pleaded for guidance, and I knew that any hesitation could cost a life. While assessing the patient, I noticed a detail that could have gone unnoticed. The ventilation was failing, the equipment wasn't working properly. It was a brutal test, not just of my technical skill, but of my ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. I remembered every mission where a failure could mean death. I remembered every impossible decision I had made in the field, and I felt the familiar mix of fear and absolute focus. Hold on tight, adjust the mask, check the oxygen line. My orders echoed, firm, precise, with no room for error. Every second was vital, every action laden with responsibility. The nurse and colleagues were no longer whispering, no longer laughing. They followed my every command with absolute attention, knowing that this was the difference between life and death. I could feel the collective tension in the air, the weight of their expectations, but also the silent energy of confidence that was beginning to form. Then, something unexpected happened. The patient began to have a severe arrhythmia. The monitor triggered red alerts, the alarms intensified, and my body responded instinctively. It was the kind of moment that defines people, not just veterans, but anyone who has ever faced situations where every decision counts. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the intensity of the responsibility. Every war memory, every loss, and every scar converged in that instant, guiding my movements with almost automatic precision. The nurse looked at me and I could see the fear in her eyes, but also the silent confidence she now placed in me. "You can do it," I thought, not just as a mantra, but as a certainty. Every gesture, every command, every adjustment to the equipment was an act of survival, not just for the patient, but for everyone who was there, witnessing without knowing exactly how to process what they were seeing. The moment reached its peak when the patient suffered a complete cardiac arrest. The entire corridor seemed to fall silent, as if the world had stopped to observe. Time slowed down, each second lasting an eternity. I took a deep breath, adjusted the rhythm of the compressions, coordinated the team, and with a calmness acquired only through years of combat, conducted each action necessary to reverse the situation. And then, finally, the answer came. The monitor stabilized, the vital signs returned to normal, and the patient slowly opened his eyes. A collective sigh ran through the corridor, and I felt an enormous weight dissipate from my chest. The tension, the fear, the extreme responsibility, everything converged in that moment of silent victory. What was once contempt and mockery had now transformed into admiration, respect, and implicit recognition. Every glance around reflected not only relief, but a deep understanding that this veteran, marked by war and the scars of life, was capable of facing the impossible and winning. In that instant, I realized that the climax wasn't just about saving lives. It was about proving to myself and to others that courage and experience are not measured by appearances, but by action, determination, and heart. Every scar I carried, every painful memory, every moment of humiliation I faced throughout my life converged in that moment, showing that true strength lies in the combination of knowledge, control, and compassion. As the patient breathed again, stable, I allowed myself a brief moment of relief. There was no applause, only silent and profound respect. I knew that night would be remembered, not just as the moment I saved lives, but as the moment my past and my present met to show my true strength. After the adrenaline finally began to subside, I stood in the hallway, watching the patient being taken to the recovery unit. The constant sound of the monitors still filled the room, but now with a calmer, almost comforting rhythm. The tension of the night was beginning to dissipate, and I could finally process everything that had happened. Every gesture, every decision, every second that someone's life was in my hands weighed on my memory as if it were etched forever. What struck me most, however, was not the stabilized vital signs or the patient's response. It was the change in the gaze of the people around me. Those who had previously laughed or mocked me now observed me with silent respect, restrained recognition, and a kind of nonverbal reverence. The nurse who had underestimated my scars approached, now with an expression of humility. I had learned, even if only in that instant, that actions are worth much more than words or superficial judgments. I realized that the consequences of that night would extend beyond the hospital. My own sense of identity and worth had been reaffirmed. Every scar I carry, every painful memory of the war, every trauma that often kept me awake at night now had a clear purpose. To remind me of what I am capable of doing no matter who tries to underestimate me or judge me superficially. Life has taught me that respect is not given automatically, it is earned with courage, experience, and integrity. And when earned, it spreads silently but lastingly. As I walked slowly down the hallway, feeling my tired muscles and my heart still racing, I thought about the many times I couldn't save someone, the losses that had haunted me for years. The pain of those memories was still there, but now mixed with a sense of accomplishment and purpose. There was something powerful in recognizing that, despite everything, I could still make a difference. The night had given me the opportunity to reaffirm not only my professional ability, but my worth as a human being, as a veteran who has faced death countless times and yet remains steadfast. The respect silently earned that night also had a social impact. Colleagues who previously looked at me with suspicion now sought my advice, followed my instructions attentively, and subtly incorporated my presence into the critical decisions of the shift. The change wasn't dramatic or noisy, but concrete. My actions had altered the collective perception of who I am, and the recognition, though silent, was undeniable. Furthermore, I perceived a profound emotional consequence. The night reminded me that, although the war shaped me, there is still room for growth, reconnection, and learning. Each patient saved, each act of courage, each moment of control under pressure is a form of silent redemption, a reminder that even the deepest traumas can be transformed into strength. As I left the hospital at the end of my shift, The rain was still falling, lighter than before. The cool air brought a feeling of renewal. I thought of the nurse, my colleagues, the patient, and above all myself. The night had ended, but the consequences of that experience would last far beyond. In the way others see me, in the way I see myself, and in the silent but firm way my scars and my actions continue to tell my story. I left the hospital with firm steps, feeling the weight of the war memories and the relief of the intense night combine in an almost symbolic way. Every scar, every past failure, and every present victory had converged in that experience, leaving me more aware of my strength, more secure in my worth, and more connected to the life I can still touch and protect. The night, though full of tension, humiliation, and challenges, ended with a clear lesson. Our actions shape the perception of the world, our courage defines our legacy, and, however painful the journey may be, each experience leaves consequences that transcend the immediate moment and strengthen us for future challenges. As I walked alone out of the hospital, the cold of the night touching my face, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. The tension, the contempt, the fear, the adrenaline, and finally the recognition. All of this formed a mosaic of experiences that reminded me of who I am and what my scars truly represent. Life, like war, is not measured only by visible victories or defeats, but by the silent courage to act even when no one is watching or believing in you. I learned once again that true respect is not something granted by appearances or titles. It is earned by what we do in the most critical moments, by the impact of our actions, and by the integrity with which we face each challenge. My scars, which so many judgmental eyes have considered flaws, are actually testimonies of perseverance, courage, and sacrifice. They tell stories of pain and loss, but also of survival and determination, and that no one can take away from me. The nurse, who had laughed at my scars earlier in the evening, now understood, even if silently, that life is not measured by what is seen, but by what is done when the situation demands more than words. Each act of courage in that hallway was proof that true greatness is not flaunted, but demonstrated through actions, even when humiliation, contempt, or fear are present. Reflecting on the war, I realized that the experience of dealing with loss, pain, and extreme responsibility prepared me for moments like that. But I also understood something deeper. The world can be unfair. People can underestimate and laugh at what they don't understand. But true dignity lies in how we respond, in the ability to remain calm, to protect others, and to act with humanity even under maximum pressure. That night was a reminder that every scar, visible or invisible, has a purpose. Every trauma, every loss, every moment of humiliation faced throughout life, however painful, is a building block in the construction of our strength and character. And most importantly, it is action, not the judgment of others, that defines our worth. As the cold wind blew over my shoulders and the rain began to subside, I realized that the true lesson of that experience was not just about saving lives or gaining respect, but about recognizing the importance of our own history, our scars, and our courage. I learned that we cannot control what others think or say, but we can control how we respond, how we act, and how we leave our mark, silent, firm, and unforgettable. And then, I felt a kind of peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. The night had been intense, full of tension and danger, but also of learning and validation. Every action I took, every critical decision I faced, every moment of contempt and humiliation overcome, had culminated in something greater. A reaffirmation of the value of life, courage, and experience. In the end, the moral of the story is clear and simple. Life gives us no guarantees. The world can be cruel, and we will often be judged by what is seen on the surface. But the true measure of a man, or of any person, lies in his quiet courage, in his ability to act with integrity, and in how he transforms pain, trauma, and rejection into strength, compassion, and positive impact. As I walked away from the hospital, I felt that that night was not just an isolated chapter in my life, but a permanent reminder that even after the war, the battle continues, not just outside, but within ourselves. And with every scar, every memory, and every action, we carry proof that true strength is built in silence, forged in suffering, and revealed in the decisions that truly matter.